Cobalt enables high-energy lithium-ion batteries and heat-resistant superalloys because cobalt atoms stabilize battery cathodes and strengthen nickel-based turbine metals. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, is the dominant miner, about 3/4 of global mine output in recent years, while most refining happens in China, which buys partially processed feed from the DRC. This concentration creates supply risk for electric vehicles, grid storage, smartphones, and jet engines, even as some car makers shift a portion of models to lower cobalt chemistries. Platinum group metals, especially platinum, palladium, rhodium, and iridium, are indispensable industrial catalysts. In gasoline and diesel cars, they convert toxic exhaust into less harmful gases. In the clean energy system, platinum and iridium catalyze hydrogen production in fuel cells. The world's largest resources and much of annual output come from South Africa's Bushveld complex, with additional supply from Zimbabwe and Russia, which makes Africa central to both current emissions control and future hydrogen technologies. Manganese is the quiet workhorse of modern materials. In steel making, it removes oxygen and sulfur and forms alloys that prevent brittleness. In batteries, it appears as manganese sulfate for NMC and LMFP chemistries. Global ore supply leans on African producers, especially South Africa and Gabon, so logistics shocks, coups, or rail bottlenecks in these corridors can ripple through steel and battery supply chains worldwide. Chromium is essential for stainless steel because it forms a thin chromium oxide layer that prevents corrosion. The world's stainless appliances, medical tools, chemical plants, and desalination systems depend on steady ferrochrome supply, and South Africa is a principal miner and smelter. Because stainless grades must meet minimum chromium thresholds, substitution is limited. If ferrochrome flows tighten, prices and construction lead times rise across many sectors. Phosphate rock feeds the world by supplying phosphorus, one of the 3 primary plant nutrients along with nitrogen and potassium. Morocco, including Western Sahara, controls the largest known reserves by far, which anchors global fertilizer security. Phosphate ore is processed into phosphoric acid and upgraded fertilizers that sustain crop yields. Without them, global food production would fall sharply, so market shocks tied to Moroccan supply or export policy quickly influence food prices. Tantalum, sourced from the ore coltan, makes ultra-reliable capacitors that store and release small bursts of energy in phones, laptops, medical implants, and aerospace electronics. Eastern DRC and Rwanda are key sources, and conflict-linked taxation around deposits like the Rubaya area has at times financed armed groups. One reason why manufacturers must use audited, conflict-free supply chains under due diligence regimes. Supply disruption here can slow electronics production out of proportion to the tiny mass of tantalum each device contains. Natural graphite forms the anode, the negative electrode, in most lithium-ion batteries. Each EV typically contains tens of kilograms of it. Africa's role is growing as Mozambique and Madagascar expand production of battery-grade flake graphite. Because most anode material is still refined in China, adding African mine supply plus new Western processing aims to de-risk a choke point in EV supply chains. If graphite flows tighten, battery output stalls even when lithium and nickel are available. Bauxite, the ore of aluminum, underpins everything from power lines and EV frames to beverage cans and aircraft. Guinea holds some of the world's richest bauxite resources and is a top exporter, feeding alumina refineries and smelters outside Africa. Because aluminum is also crucial for solar frames and transmission hardware, disruptions in Guinean mining or shipping would echo through clean energy buildouts and packaging supply chains. Gold is one of Africa's oldest and most visible exports. Ancient gold from Ghana and Mali traveled across the Sahara to Europe and the Middle East, and today, Africa remains central to bullion markets. South Africa, Ghana, Mali, and Tanzania are major producers. Gold functions not only as jewelry and wealth storage, but also as a strategic reserve asset for central banks worldwide. Because it can't be manufactured, disruptions in African mining immediately influence world gold prices and financial security. Oil and natural gas from Africa fuel much of the modern world. Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, and Libya are top producers, exporting millions of barrels daily. Their petroleum feeds refineries in Europe, Asia, and North America, shaping energy markets and geopolitics. Liquefied natural gas from Nigeria and Mozambique is increasingly vital as Europe seeks alternatives to Russian gas. Any disruption in African oil and gas production directly affects fuel prices, power generation, and industrial supply chains abroad. Uranium is indispensable for nuclear power generation. Niger and Namibia are leading African producers, supplying fuel for reactors in Europe, the US, and Asia. Because nuclear power is viewed as a low-carbon option for baseload electricity, uranium security has become more important. Supply constraints in Niger after coups or policy shifts ripple globally, showing how African mines anchor nuclear energy's future. Diamonds from Africa hold both industrial and luxury importance. Botswana, South Africa, Angola, and Namibia produce large volumes of gem-quality stones and industrial diamonds used in drilling, cutting, and high-pressure applications. Botswana, in particular, has leveraged diamond wealth into state revenue and infrastructure. Global diamond markets and jewelry industries remain tied to African production, and alternative sources are limited. Copper underpins the electrification of modern economies. It conducts electricity in wires, motors, renewable power grids, and electronics. Africa's copper belt, spanning Zambia and the DRC, is one of the richest in the world. With the growth of electric vehicles and renewable infrastructure, demand for African copper has surged. Supply disruptions here would bottleneck clean energy buildouts worldwide. Rare earth elements used in wind turbines, EV motors, and defense systems are also emerging from African projects in Burundi, South Africa, and Tanzania. These minerals are difficult to substitute and are largely dominated by Chinese processing. African mines are increasingly seen as critical alternatives to diversify supply for Western economies. Coltan, which yields both tantalum and niobium, ties directly into global security electronics. Beyond capacitors and phones, tantalum is used in aerospace turbines, missile systems, and medical implants because of its high melting point and resistance to corrosion. African sources, particularly the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, supply a large fraction of the world's coltan. Because alternative producers are limited, instability in mining regions or trade restrictions can disrupt global defense and medical industries. Timber and forestry products from Central and West Africa, such as Congo Basin hardwoods, underpin global furniture, construction, and paper industries. The Congo Basin is sometimes called the second lung of the earth after the Amazon because it absorbs vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Illegal logging and unsustainable exploitation threaten both biodiversity and climate regulation, making African forests not just an export source but also a stabilizer for the global environment. Fish stocks from African coastal waters, especially off West Africa, sustain millions of local livelihoods and feed international seafood demand. Countries like Mauritania, Senegal, and Namibia lease fishing rights to European and Asian fleets. Overfishing pressures raise global concerns, as disruptions here affect not only local food security, but also international seafood markets and ecological balance. Water resources in Africa also matter globally. The Nile, Congo, and Niger rivers drive agriculture, hydropower, and transport across the continent. Internationally, Africa's role as a water tower influences migration, food security, and global agricultural markets. For example, irrigation tied to Nile water affects both African exports and global grain prices. Finally, solar and wind energy potential in Africa is itself a resource the world increasingly depends on. The Sahara Desert alone receives enough solar energy to power Europe many times over if harnessed through large-scale projects. Initiatives like Desertec and cross-border interconnectors reflect growing global interest in Africa as a renewable power hub that could export clean electricity to Europe and beyond.